This reflects just how close a margin Republicans have in the House and how badly they need loyal to Donald Trump Republicans in the House.
Signals an inappropriate platform to discuss highly sensitive information. They did that, and I'm quite confident it's never going to happen again.
We're committed to working hand in hand with our Colombian partners to enhance not only border security, but also that we will support the enforcement of our immigration and our criminal laws.
Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in Washington. Happy opening day. Yes, I am a San Diego Padres fan. More on that fun fact when we wrap up the show. First, nomination pulled. The White House withdraws New York Congresswoman Elise Stefanik's nomination to be the next ambassador to the United Nations. Why the Republicans' tight majority in the House of Representatives is quite likely to blame. Group chat in court, not those who were on the chat, but the whole issue. A federal judge held a hearing about the war plans that were accidentally shared with a journalist, and that judge is ordering officials to preserve all the signal messages in question for review. This is the same judge, incidentally, that President Trump has said should be impeached for the way he has overseen a controversial deportation flights case. Also, tariff turmoil. The Dow drops one day after the president announces a 25% levy on cars not made in the U.S. And some auto stocks today took a dive. What all this could mean politically and for your wallet. Later this hour, more job cuts. The Trump administration is shrinking, quite noticeably, the size of the Department of Health and Human Services. By how much? Nearly a quarter of its current employees. The impact this could have on the nation's ability to fight diseases. All that tonight. But we're going to start with Ed O'Keefe and Nicole Killian. Ed is at the White House, Nicole, of course, on Capitol Hill. Ed, tell us more about pulling the nomination of Elise Stefanik.
Well, Major, go Yankees. It turns out that the White House realized yet again that the margins are just too narrow in the Republican-controlled House of Representatives, that they can't afford to lose that key vote from the Adirondacks that Elise Stefanik provides. She was set to be nominated and probably easily confirmed, potentially even with bipartisan support, to lead the or to serve as ambassador to the United Nations. But given the margins right now, which sit at about, 218 to 213. By next Tuesday, if Republicans win the two special elections in Florida, it'll go up to 220 to 213, but then there's two open Democratic seats. So you'll have a margin eventually later this year of 220 to 215, with a lot of big votes to come and a handful of Republicans who are likely to vote no. The Speaker, the White House, realizing we can't afford to let it go. Was there some reluctance on her part? Perhaps. Was there also potentially some difference of opinion or personality between her and those that now control the State Department, given that she was nominated and came up as the ambassador pick before Secretary of State Rubio was in place? Yes, I'm told that's also potentially part of it. But the big reason, and the one everyone will focus on publicly, is that margin in the House and how razor-thin it remains.
And, Nicole, this is right in your lane on Capitol Hill. Pick up on what Ed said, not only about the closeness of the margin, the necessity Republicans now see in the leadership ranks on the House side to maintain every viable Republican vote possible, and what this might mean for what's going on behind the scenes in somewhat difficult negotiations between House Republicans and Senate Republicans on how to proceed on a budget and tax bill.
Well, I would first say go Dodgers, but that aside, I think what's interesting, I think what is interesting is that for all the talk about how narrow the margins are, I mean, we're in the business of journalism. This isn't breaking news here in the Congress. So this did catch some lawmakers by surprise, even within leadership. For instance, we were told Senate Majority Leader John Thune said that he was not given a heads up about the withdrawal of this nomination. We caught up with Majority Leader Steve Scalise soon after the news broke. He didn't seem to be aware at the time before this was all confirmed that her nomination would be pulled. He still was backing her as a solid candidate for the UN ambassadorship. So from that standpoint, many lawmakers were a bit surprised by this. We did hear from Senate Foreign Relations Chair Jim Risch, who said that he did have a conversation with the White House, which informed him that Stefanik's nomination had been pulled. However, he did not say whether or not he believed that that was the right decision. Obviously, Stefanik's nomination went through his committee. She got out of that committee with bipartisan support. He told me that was a decision, obviously, that was ultimately up to the president. I also talked to a member of the Foreign Relations Committee, Congressman Brian Schatz, a Democrat. He, too, said Democrats on the panel did not get any heads up about this. And he, as many lawmakers have indicated, believe this is because, again, of these margins in the House, that House Republicans, there's a little trepidation and uncertainty about having the votes in place, particularly when it comes to advancing the president's agenda. So he echoed what we are hearing from some congressional Republicans, that that may be at play as well. I also asked him who he would like to see in the role, and he said Mitt Romney, which would be an interesting choice if it were to come to pass. But, that being said, many lawmakers on both sides of the aisle really felt that Stefanik was solid, was sharp, would likely advance. So it did take many of them aback to hear this news today.
Oh, Ed O'Keefe, let's just put a pin in that. The probability of Mitt Romney getting that nomination, near zero.
Just about as good as the Red Sox winning the World Series. Yes,
Okay.
Zero.
We're gonna keep the baseball theme, which I got rolling right along. Nicole, I want to ask you this, because the president said on social media, Elise Stefanik will go back to her position in the House Republican leadership. Is there a vacancy?
Well, not really, because now that vacancy is filled by Lisa McClain, who is the GOP conference chair, and it's unlikely that she would step down from that post. So whether or not some new leadership position is created remains to be seen. That is something that Speaker Mike Johnson indicated in a post on X, saying that, Elise Stefanik is a great leader, and they will welcome her back to the leadership table, but he didn't define what position that might be. So, again, there's still a lot to work out here in the House. But, again, one thing we know is that, obviously, having those votes in place was important not only to the president, but to the speaker as well.
Ed, quickly, the Signal Yemen attack plan story, day 4. Mistake is the word that Republicans most frequently use. Is it going to be a damaging one for anyone that you can tell involved?
The president is closely monitoring to see what the ongoing media and political fallout from it will be. We can report at this hour that he is standing by his national security advisor and the defense secretary. There was a long meeting in the Oval Office yesterday about all this, where they discussed the possibility of Mike Waltz resigning. Waltz did not offer it. The president didn't ask for it, and he is standing by them. We should also point out that a federal judge this afternoon ordered most of those on this text chain to preserve the texts, to keep them so that they can be added to the official presidential records. A nonpartisan watchdog group here in Washington had sued to ensure that they eventually do end up in the records as a formality, in essence, because they believe that this is classified and it should be part of it. The judge, same one, by the way, ruling in the Alien Enemies Act case, just randomly selected by the district court here in Washington to see you've got till Monday to do this. We probably can avoid a court case. Let's agree to get them preserved and move on. We'll see if that happens.
Also worth pointing out, the top Republican, top Democrat on the Senate Armed Services Committee today sent a letter asking for an Inspector General, Pentagon Inspector General investigation at all that, which is a bipartisan move that the White House cannot ignore. Ed O'Keefe and Nicole Killian, thank you so much. Kelly O'Grady joins me now. So, Kelly, tariffs, autos, market reaction. Sum it up for us if you can.
So look, investors didn't love it. You saw all the 3 major indexes close down, but not the crazy thing that we've seen in the past couple of weeks. Where we really saw how investors felt were in the major 3 auto stocks. So I'll just kind of run you through. GM closed down over 7%, Ford down 4%, Stellantis down 1.3%. And really, I'll zero in on GM because that is all about the fact that they have more exposure with where their cars are made than the other big 2. they rely on Mexico and Canada far more than Ford and Stellantis. So when you're thinking about a tariff being slapped on any foreign cars coming into the U.S., they are going to feel it most. You contrast that with what happened in the markets with Tesla and Rivian. 100% of their cars are made in the U.S. Investors loved that because the stock was up today.
Kelly, I want to play for you something that the Canadian Prime Minister, Mark Carney, said, because you mentioned Canada and the implications for the auto industry here and there. Let's listen.
The old relationship we had with the United States, based on deepening integration of our economies and tight security and military cooperations, is over.
Mark Carney also said that until President Trump up front respects Canadian sovereignty, this relationship will remain on the rocks.
Well, I mean, that we have heard some bark and bite throughout this entire thing. We have seen the Ontario PM come to the table and talk with, I believe it was Commerce Secretary Lutnick, about different things. But I think what is really interesting here is so much of the supply chains are intertwined. Canada, Mexico, the U.S., and these auto manufacturers invested in that because of that important trade deal, USMCA. And now they're sort of looking at things going, oh my gosh, I have to now bring my plants to the US, and that's going to cost time, billions of dollars. And then let's look ahead, Major, to 2026 when the USMCA is up for review. And maybe all of this concern goes away. Maybe this is an entire negotiation, but certainly strong words from the Canadian PM. We'll see if that bark turns into bite.
USMCA negotiated during Trump 1.0. Kelly O'Grady, thank you very, very much. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem's Latin American trip included a photo op at the El Salvador prison that's holding Venezuelans deported by the United States. More on her visit and the administration's legal fight over those deportation flights next, right here on America Decides.
Do not come to our country illegally. You will be removed and you will be prosecuted. But know that this facility is one of the tools in our toolkit that we will use if you commit crimes against the American people.
That Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem inside what can only be described as a very tough, some would call it notorious, El Salvadoran prison, where right now Venezuelans deported by the Trump administration are being held. Vanessa Cardenas is here now. She is the executive director of America's Voice, which advocates for undocumented immigrants and for immigration reform. So I'd like to ask your opinion, first of all, of what we just saw, the visuals there, because what governments say and what they do is really important, but where they say it and the backdrop they have also can sometimes matter. Your thoughts?
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. Well, I think that this really sends a chilling message in terms of what our government is trying to do and is actually doing. And it is sending the message that they're willing to violate our civil liberties and using sort of this invasion rhetoric to go after immigrants, including legal immigrants who are here legally, and send them to a prison in another country, a prison that's known for its human rights violations and for its effort to be as brutal and as cruel as possible. So I think this is an alarming sign, another sign in the escalation of the Trump administration's efforts to go after the immigrant community.
What are your baseline legal concerns, Vanessa, about the process by which those Venezuelans accused of being gang members, though it is not clear all of them are, were sent to El Salvador? What are your basic legal concerns about that process? What do you see going forward from that process?
Listen, there are many concerns. First of all, the government has not provided proof that many of these people that were sent, the Venezuelans that were sent, were actually criminals or had a criminal record. So I think that is incredibly problematic that the government is picking up people, not only not giving them access to our lawyer and respecting their due process, but also not providing any evidence that these are in fact people with criminal records. So that's one. I think, again, sending them to a prison in another country is very unprecedented and sort of using the playbook of using this invasion rhetoric to go after people with no criminal record. I think what we hope to see is for this administration to stop using these tactics, to respect the rule of law, to make sure that, if they're going to go after people, that they have to show evidence that, in fact, those accused have actual criminal records. So I think that there's a lot that this administration is doing that's super harmful, and it's not the only example, right? They're also going after legal residents in the U.S., and we had also several cases, especially of college students who are being detained, who are being arrested, who are in the process now of fighting their deportation proceedings. So there's a bunch of, again, examples of how this administration is violating our civil liberties and constitutional rights.
Vanessa, I want to quote for you something that the Secretary of State Marco Rubio said today when asked about not only the student at the University of Alabama, but other students, Columbia University, detained by ICE because they were activists in this country. He said, and I quote, "Every time I find one of these lunatics, I take away their visa," saying that it is, quote, "crazy and stupid for any country not to revoke visas for college students who come to the country to agitate or become social activists." Your reaction?
Well, listen, I think that America is known as a country that respects our freedoms, and that a constitutional right that we have is freedom of speech. I think the idea that a young person cannot exercise the freedom of speech is a very dangerous message that our Secretary of State is sending. I understand that there are people that should not be here because they have committed crimes. I understand that needs to happen, but the government should be able to provide proof of what crimes people have committed for the government to take away the rights and the liberties, for the government to go into people's neighborhoods and with people in masks and abducting, in the case of the tough student, a young woman, and put her in an unmarked car. So I think our government cannot hide behind the words that Rubio is saying. We have to have evidence of people actually doing wrongdoing if we are going to be implementing these very extreme measures.
Vanessa Cardenas with America's Voice. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, the administration's overhaul of federal health agency, where Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is making cuts and what the implications might be. That's next, right here on America Decides.
I want this agency to be once again a revered scientific institution that once made HHS the envy of the world.
Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us. That was Robert F. Kennedy Jr. this morning announcing plans to dramatically reduce the size of the workforce within various federal health agencies. The Trump administration plans to let go of some 10,000 federal workers in the healthcare area and then not fill another 10,000 positions also within those agencies. Among the cuts, specifically, 3,500 from Food and Drug Administration, 1,200 from the National Institutes of Health. CBS News digital reporter Alex Tin joins me now. Alex, always great to see you. This is not a surprise considering the overall thrust of the Trump administration to reduce the size of the federal workforce. From your vantage point, the implications.
Yeah, it's right that it's not a surprise. But what is surprising is some of the ways in which they're going about these cuts. So, for example, one of the things that Secretary Kennedy mentioned is he actually wants to create a whole new agency within HHS, combining a bunch of different offices and agencies that used to do separate work. He's calling this new agency the Administration for a Healthy America. You know, for the people watching at home, that sounds an awful lot like MAHA, the Make America Healthy Again agenda that he campaigned on with President Trump. And within this agency, you're going to have a bunch of different offices that used to be in different agencies, all grouped together now. Everything from the office responsible for dietary guidelines, that's those, hotly contested nutrition recommendations that are now up for review this year, all the way over to the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, all under this new roof.
And does that carry with it, this reorganization, the implication that these agencies, once more or less quasi-independent, are now going to be reporting more directly to the political head of the HHS and then possibly also taking cues from the White House?
Yeah, potentially. I mean, you heard in that video, we played a little bit of it right at the top. We heard Kennedy complain in that video that he was frustrated with what he called defiant bureaucrats in some of these health agencies, essentially defying their orders for information or control of these agencies and the information that they have. So yes, I do think part of this organization, this reorganization, is to consolidate control of the different health agencies. But obviously a lot of it is to meet these goals that have been laid out by DOJ and the White House for major cuts across the federal government, not just HHS.
Scientists and researchers would say they're not defiant, they're just following the science or the research.
Yeah, that's right. And, you know, some of the so-called requests that we've heard denied by these bureaucrats, as they say, often that's from career civil servants who say that, you know, they had a duty to protect XYZ database that is not supposed to be accessed by political appointees. But of course, what we've seen in the week since is that essentially the White House, DOJ, and the political appointees at the Department of Health and Human Services have been pretty clear. We are in control. We should have control of this data, and you must hand over this data. Otherwise, you will be let go.
Alex Tin, always a pleasure to have you. Thank you so much. King Charles III was hospitalized earlier today after experiencing complications related to his ongoing cancer treatment. Buckingham Palace released a statement saying the British monarch experienced temporary side effects that required a, quote, short period of observation in the hospital. He has since returned to his home in London. Buckingham Palace is postponing engagements scheduled for tomorrow as, quote, a precautionary measure.
Would you like to be American?
Oh, no, not really. I could visit America just for vacation and look around, but no.
What do you think about President Trump saying that he'd like to take over Greenland?
I think it's stupid. He says he wants national security, but I don't believe him.
What do you think he really wants?
Something else that he's hiding.
Polling shows 85% of Greenlanders, those who live in Greenland, do not want to be part of the United States. But that is not stopping Vice President Vance from visiting the world's largest island tomorrow, as President Trump seeks to acquire it by one means or another. Our panel will dig into this and other topics. That's next, right here on America Decides. Welcome back. We love to say that, a brand new CBS News poll finds Americans' outlook for the economy has grown just a bit more pessimistic in the past month. High prices are weighing on people's minds, with most saying, as far as they're concerned and as far as their budget is concerned, they're still on the rise. Here with me is CBS News Executive Director of Elections and Surveys, your friend and mine, Anthony Salvanto. Tell us, Anthony, what we have learned.
Hey, man, how you doing? Look,
good.
Start with this, Major, where you've got, yes, as you said before, you've got this larger number now since last month who think that looking ahead to the next year, the economy might be in recession. So a little bit less optimism there. But the other thing I want to show everybody is that this collectively, whether people think it's going to be booming or in recession or something in between, is uncertainty. And that's what's reflected here collectively. Because if you take a look at then why people say they evaluate the economy the way they do, Major, look at this. 9 in 10 say it is because of prices. They don't think their incomes are keeping up with inflation. That has not changed. You and I have been standing here talking about this for years since the pandemic, and that is continuing to hit Americans.
And it's worth pointing out, this is not a massive shift in the data, but it does suggest that there's some hesitancy when people hear the president talk as boastfully about what's going to come. Golden age of America, renaissance, huge economic boom. They're a little bit hesitant. At least that's what we, I think, safely conclude from this data.
Well, there's a lot in here, Major. And one of the things we've seen in previous polling is that people are concerned that tariffs might raise prices. We know that. And the other thing that we see, remember, this doesn't affect everybody equally because take a look at these income splits. For people who are at the upper end of the income scale, they're much more likely to say their financial situation is good than people who are not. And so remember, it's not just partisanship. It's a lot about income and how inflation and prices affect folks, Major.
And how they affect folks day to day affects how they look now into the future. Anthony Salvanto, always a pleasure, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to bring in our reporter panel, Daniela Diaz and Evan McMorrow-Santoro. Both are reporters for Notice. Remember, that is news of the U.S. So, Daniela, I'm going to start with you. Let's talk about Greenland and Elise Stefanik. Thoughts on both?
The two biggest things happening today, as well as a signal chat. First, before the break, you mentioned that the people in Greenland were not looking forward to that visit from Vice President J.D. Vance and his wife, Usha Vance. They're going to be visiting Greenland this week. That comes after they had to scale back their trip because they were not welcome in the capital. And the government of Denmark saying that they also are not happy about these comments that Donald Trump keeps making, that he wants to take over Greenland. He would like Greenland to be part of the U.S. I mean, this is really, really interesting, Major, because he's not letting up. Some folks think that this could be possibly part of a bigger strategy, national security strategy that Trump is doing. But the fact that Vance is visiting Greenland shows that this might be a serious inquiry that they're making and trying to, ease relations with the people of Greenland, the government, Denmark, in an effort to continue their efforts to take over.
Right. And what about Elise Stefanik not being any longer a nominee for U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, but back in the House and looking for a spot in the leadership, which has already been filled?
Look, we haven't seen Elise Stefanik in person since the announcement, but I can bet that she's probably not the happiest person as of this moment. She, of course, was hoping to resign from the House to become the ambassador to the UN. She had her confirmation, her hearing date or her nominations vote set had not been on the calendar just yet, but she was hoping to have that role and was really looking forward to it. Anyone that talked to her knew that. She would tell you that herself. The bigger picture here being that it seems like Republicans are now realizing that this tight majority in the House is a priority, that they have to focus on winning Mike Waltz's seat in Florida, her seat now that she's going to keep in New York, which were both seats that people were watching really closely, despite the fact that they're very strong Republican seats, strong Republican districts. So I feel like Elise Stefanik is going to still play a major role in the House. She doesn't have her leadership position as the number 4 Republican, but she is not going to go anywhere, and she likes being someone who's in leadership.
Evan, whenever I talk to you, we tend to drill down on all things New York politics, so you've got to have some beat knowledge on this one.
Let me first just say your viewers have been now subjected to the Notice A team. Now strap in for the Notice B team. No, actually,
not true. Not true.
Actually, it's quite fascinating that you say this because on my way over here, actually, I got an email from the Democrats here in New York who looked at the Stefanik situation and immediately turned it into a domestic political situation, which of course it is, as Daniela mentioned, right? This whole goal of passing this massive tax cut and spending plan that Trump wants to do is sort of the reason why we've seen this change. Well, Democrats weren't talking about the idea that there's still not a UN ambassador. They're talking about this bill. They're talking about the fact that having her in there makes it maybe more likely this bill passes and puts more pressure, actually, Democrats say, on other Republicans here in New York who are hoping to have a good year next year here and hoping to have a good year this year, maybe possibly this year here, that this bill that is the center of all of this, that may end up, affecting things like Medicare, Medicaid, popular programs that may need to be cut by this administration in this bill. That's what they're talking about, and they're talking about Stefanik. They're talking about the bill that may be going forward and what impact it might have on people, regular Americans. Foreign policy is really not the focus that we saw so far today.
Right, distilling it in terms of what it might mean for the future of that legislation, what is the political impact and the practical impact of that legislation. And Evan, you know better than either of the three of us, I think, about what New Yorkers want to see in this as relates to something called SALT, which is not something you put on your steak, but it's something you deal with your accountant.
That's absolutely right. I mean, look, a central concern that the Republicans want to accomplish here is restoring this state and local tax break that New Yorkers used to enjoy. It got cut significantly in the last Trump administration, and one of the Republicans in Congress now, who wants to be the governor of New York, it seems, has put a lot of stake in trying to restore those SALT cuts in this bill. So everything sort of circles around New York right now and this bill when you're talking about this, things that New Yorkers want to get accomplished, they don't want to get accomplished. And so what the Trump administration is doing now is leaving someone like Stefanik in there to try and get that bill passed. But part of the struggle is going to be getting other Republicans in New York to vote for it. It's a really fascinating time. This is the city where it all happens.
And Danielle, I'll get back to you in a minute. But one thing I want to also talk to Evan about is Andrew Cuomo, the mayor's race, and how that all is reading currently.
Well, look, we've seen some early numbers that show that Andrew Cuomo, who has huge name ID, is doing very well in the early iterations of this mayor's race. But there are, of course, like 1 billion candidates running for the Democratic nomination.
Just under 1 billion.
And well, yeah, maybe so 995,000, something like that. And as we've seen here in the past, right, the challenge with the New York election process is that in the primaries, and only the primaries, New York voters are asked to use this multi-candidate, jungle primary voting system where they sort of rank the candidates that they want. And we have seen in the past that even with poll numbers and people doing really well, that ranking system can really change things around really fast. We got the mayor we have now, Eric Adams, partially because the ranking system sort of kicked it over to him, despite the fact that he was not the most popular candidate in a lot of people's minds. So it's early days. Cuomo is running hard on the idea of being able to fight with Donald Trump, being able to look back on his record. But this is one of the wildest campaigns you're going to see is going to be the one in New York this year, and it's only got a few months to go.
Excellent. Danielle, I want to ask you from your perspective on House Republicans, the conversations they're having with Senate Republicans, the future of this bill. Does this Elise Stefanik move have any contours to it that feel like a panic button?
Look, I think I was just on the Capitol Hill just a few hours ago talking to House Republicans. I talked to Leader Scalise about specifically the budget bill and the priorities right now with trying to reconcile the differences between what Senate Republicans want to see in this bill and what House Republicans want to see in this bill. It's very typical House versus Senate, what's taking place right now on the Capitol. Senate Republicans are trying to move through their very thinner, skinny budget resolution that, of course, doesn't include any tax cuts. House Republicans are saying our majority is so slim and we got everyone behind this that we cannot afford to change what we actually passed.
Right.
Exactly. So we're seeing these personalities, which is really what Capitol Hill is, just a lot of personalities really clashing, try to figure out how they're going to get this massive bill. First of all, the framework ironed out because they haven't even been able to do that. And then imagine writing it. And, Evan mentioned, of course, those crucial Medicaid cuts that Democrats are talking about in New York and everywhere. As we're seeing people go to the town halls in their districts, they're going to go to an April recess for Easter break. We're going to hear a lot of Democrats talk about what potential Medicaid cuts to be, and also Republicans defending the fact that there won't be Medicaid cuts. But where are they going to get those cuts from? They have $880 billion. They need a cut. So
they got to find them somewhere. They've got to find them somewhere and somehow. Daniela Diaz, Evan McMorris, Santoro, as always, thank you. Trump advisor Elon Musk is outspoken in his criticism of DEI programs, diversity, equity, inclusion, but he hasn't always been as critical as he is now. Next, we will dive into new reporting from the Washington Post that examines when and how Musk's views shifted. That's next here on America Decides.
I think we should be very cautious about having some sort of global mixing pot, because we will then not have, every place will be the same, and there won't be any unique cultures in the world, which I think would make the world worse.
Welcome back to America Decide. You just heard one of several comments made by Elon Musk in recent years related to race, immigration, and diversity, and casting some doubt about the directions thereof. These comments, and of course the tech billionaire's prominence in the Trump White House and his shift from backing diversity, equity, inclusion to now firmly and aggressively on social media opposing them, well, that has been meticulously examined in a new article at the Washington Post. One of its writers and reporters, Beth Reinhardt, joins me now. Beth, talk to my audience about this evolution of Elon Musk.
So for many years, Elon Musk was not active in politics, and that started to change in 2017. He's the head of Tesla at that point for several years, and lawsuits start being filed against his company alleging racial discrimination. And so when the first of these suits is filed in 2017, Elon Musk sends out a company-wide email saying, we should be really sensitive to the concerns of historically less represented groups. But at the same time, if someone makes an unintentional remark, you should apologize. And that's really the first time he kind of wades into this very, inflammatory debate, but with a very sort of measured back and forth approach. And contrast that with now, where he is 8 years later, the richest man in the world, wielding extraordinary power over how the government operates, and he's become, probably one of the leading spokesmen against DEI, and expresses a number of other strong views on race, including the one that you just aired.
And as I read your story, Beth, it occurred to me that one of the ways that Elon Musk does this is sort of indirectly. Millions and millions and millions, more than 200 million followers on X. He may not say something directly, but he will help amplify something that's very incendiary about race or immigration.
Yes, he does that quite a bit. We looked at how often he was commenting on race in this past year, and this year included. It's 1 out of 10 of his posts on X are about race or immigration and diversity. He also is frequently interacting with accounts that in the past would have been suspended for hate speech or misinformation. And he is retweeting them and saying, something like, this is concerning, or exclamation points. And then that is, as he pointed out, going to some 200 million followers, which is more than anyone else on the platform, more than President Trump. So it's a platform with no parallel in modern politics.
And what does the White House say about all this?
The White House said that the Post was trying to make him out to be a racist and that we were incorrect and we should get a life.
I see. And from your perspective, were you trying to prove that or disprove that Elon Musk is a racist?
We just were looking for what he had said. And, that's up for the readers to decide, to look at the compilation of his comments and make their own decision. The White House press secretary said we were combing the internet, and in fact we were. We were looking for what he has said about race, and doing that in the context of the fact that he has this very powerful role, and that many of the actions that the administration is taking do involve race. They have, as you know, eliminated all DEI programs, and they're going farther than that. They're purging employees who are responsible for enforcing civil rights and anti-discrimination laws. And so there's a lot of activity that Elon Musk is in charge of as in his role as Doge that does involve race and diversity and immigration. And so that's why we took a look at his views.
And that's really where the rubber meets the road on this story, because it's not just about what he has said in the past, but the position he's currently in, and do the things he has said in the past, or somewhat more recently on social media, are they reflective of actions being taken in this super powerful role he's been given by the president?
Right, and you see the president echoing what Musk has said in recent weeks, when there was that terrible plane crash between the plane and the helicopter. Musk has been saying for over a year, maybe longer than that, he's made this claim that DEI is responsible for whenever there's a plane accident. It must be the culprit must be DEI, and you saw Trump echo that last month when that terrible tragedy occurred. So he's really, his words are having an impact.
Beth Reiner, The Washington Post, thanks so very much.
Thank you.
Next week, Wisconsin voters will decide if their state Supreme Court leans conservative or liberal. Next, more on that race, which has grabbed headlines and, interestingly, the attention of Elon Musk and George Soros. That's next here on America Decides. Welcome back. On Tuesday, voters in Wisconsin will determine their state Supreme Court's ideological makeup. This, despite the race being technically nonpartisan. Democratic-backed candidate Susan Crawford will face off against Republican-backed Brad Schimel. Billionaires Elon Musk and George Soros have donated this race, as have many others, and it has seen more than $80 million in total contributions and therefore spending. CBS News political reporter Hunter Woodall joins me now to discuss. So lay it out for us. Where does this race stand?
Major, it's one of those races where anything can happen. An April election, voters, they're not used to this kind of thing. Wisconsin voters, though, have had their share of contentious spring Supreme Court elections recently. But this is one of those things where for both parties, they're trying to turn out their voters, like you said, in what's technically a nonpartisan race, but in everything in name only, because Republicans are backing a candidate, Democrats are backing a candidate. And it's come to
And they're raising money not just in the state, but out of state.
Absolutely. And you're seeing, I want to be very clear here, very wealthy donors on both sides giving to their state parties, which are then giving lots and lots of money to either of their respective candidates. And that leads to a lot of money coming into a race that doesn't, how many voters actually even know this is happening?
Mm-hmm. And any polling at all about where this race is?
With Wisconsin, it's always hard to say, but this is a state where obviously Democrats are upset that they lost it to Donald Trump last fall. They're looking at this and they see this as, okay, this is our chance to reclaim some ground in terms of the electorate, but also they want to hold on to that, liberal majority currently on the court. Now, people are going to want to extrapolate a lot of interesting, takes about this in the years to come. I would just caution them, this is an interesting race, but it is just that, an interesting race.
Interesting race there. We'll leave the extrapolations to others. We won't do that here. Let's shift our focus to Florida. Special election to fill the currently open seat vacated by Mike Waltz, who's now the National Security Advisor to President Trump.
This race should not be close on the surface. This is a seat that Waltz easily won, last fall. You look at the numbers, though, the Democrat in this race, huge spending advantage, huge fundraising advantage, huge cash on hand advantage. It's unclear why, but even Governor Ron DeSantis, Florida Republican, he's already kind of been criticizing the Republican in this race, saying, hey, underperformance, people are going to fault President Donald Trump. He's saying that's not the case. It is the fault of this candidate if there's underperformance. Fairly remarkable thing to hear the Republican governor already saying this about potential future Republican congressmen.
Lowering expectations. How about Matt Gaetz' seat in the special election there?
If you had told me that of the two races that, the previous race we talked about be the more competitive, I would have been surprised. Because obviously, Gaetz was a controversial figure. I thought there'd be some more attention on that seat. That's not been the case. Reliable GOP seat. Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, probably going to feel a lot better when this contest is over, and he has an additional vote there in the House.
Hunter Woodall, as always, thank you very much. Today is opening day. I have celebrated every opening day since 1969, when I was 7. That was the year the San Diego Padres joined the major leagues, and thus began the longest voluntary, I want to emphasize voluntary, abusive relationship of my life. But enough about me. Presidents love baseball almost as much as I do. They show up all the time to throw out the first pitch. Now, in terms of TV ratings, baseball is not as popular as it once was, but let's be honest, it will always be America's pastime. To explain why, at least in part, let me turn to the greatest baseball writer ever, Roger Angell. Now, Roger passed away in 2022, but lives with us still. Writers, you see, can do this. In Angell's first book on baseball, The Summer Game, published in 1972, he said this about that which measures a baseball game and preserves it for all time, the box score. A box score is more than a capsule archive. It is a precisely etched miniature of the sport itself, where baseball, in spite of its grassy spaciousness and apparent unpredictability, is the most intensely and satisfyingly mathematical of all our outdoor sports. Every player in every game is subjected to cold and ceaseless accounting. No ball is thrown and no base is gained without an instant responding judgment. Ball or strike, hit or error, yea or nay, and an ensuing statistic. This encompassing neatness permits the baseball fan, aided by experience and memory, to extract from a box score the same hallucinatory reality that prickles the scalp of a musician when he glances at a page of his score of Don Giovanni and actually hears bassos and sopranos, woodwinds and violins. I'm going to bet you didn't expect a reference tonight to Don Giovanni or hallucinatory reality. But in these times, politics feels nothing if not operatic, and we all experience something very close to hallucinatory reality. That does it for today. I'll be back with another edition of America Decides tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern. The Daily Report starts right now.